Marco Pierre White made Gordon cry.
He made himself cry. That was his choice to cry.
But can his steak au poivre bring you to tears? I've been sifting through all of Marco Pierre White's recipe for steak au poivre or pepper steak, steak in a pepper sauce. No two of them are alike. There's a few common elements, but he appears to change his mind. In fact, in one video he says,
"Where's the recipe? Why should there be a recipe? Why can't it be just feel? A philosophy?"
Which I'm totally fine with. I think absolutely recipes should grow and evolve and change depending on who you're serving it to and what mood you're in and whatever you've got in the cupboard. But looking through all these different recipes, I can see there are various things that go towards it to contribute to make the perfect steak au poivre. It appears to be one of his absolute favourites. He goes on about it all the time, calling it one of the French classics.
There are certain dishes which have lasted the test of time, but my favourite is a steak au poivre, and I've eaten it all over the world.
I was trying to dig into the history of this recipe. It's actually really difficult. I found this excellent article on the blog Cooking with Julian, and I'll link to it below. As expected with a recipe like this, lots of debate over who came up with it first. But we've got steak in a creamy, peppery sauce. So I've managed to track down about 6 different instances of Marco documenting his recipe. From videos, to TV reality shows, to masterclasses, to even his own cookbook, Mirabelle. Different ways to cook steak au poivre. There's a few common elements. Obviously the steak, come back to that. Obviously the pepper, and the cream. Beyond that, there's a few changes. Does he use booze? Does he use Worcester sauce? Does he use onions? Does he use corn flour? Does he use flour? Again, he changes his mind. I've gone through every single one of the versions of his recipes I could find, and I think I've found the best combination. So I'm going to start by just sweating down an onion, just roughly diced, because at the end, I'm going to pass it so that it's a completely smooth and clean sauce. And it wouldn't be a Marco recipe without butter.
What would I do without butter? Now that's an interesting statement.
I'd recommend clarifying some butter so that you're just left with the pure liquid and the butter fat that's drained away. You can do this easily. Just pop butter in the microwave until it starts to melt. Push it another 10 or 15 seconds further and then leave to stand for about half an hour, and you should find the fat drops naturally to the end. So over a very gentle heat, I'm going to add some of the clarified butter and add my onions. And then no salt at this point, but plenty of freshly ground black pepper, maybe a tablespoon by the time you've ground it all out. This is going to really add gentle heat and warmth to the base of this sauce. Having watched hours and hours of Marco prepare food, in fact the last year I've spent absolutely ages watching Marco's recipes, listening to the great man himself, and I think what's really key for him is taking your time.
And take time, invest time. If you don't, you will never get the desired result.
And also, one of the tips he shared in his masterclass was to use your senses. My onions were sizzling like mad there as it hit the butter, and it's too strong. I don't really want colour. I just want to start breaking the onions down so they start giving off their sweetness. Getting rid of the water content. Marco's obsessed with it, and he's totally right. Get rid of the water content.
Again, to remove the water content from them.
Just cook them softly and gently. Remove all that water content. And same as always, we cook to remove the water content, to remove the acidity.
Making sure we take the time to do the work to extract the flavour out of each element before we move on to the next. And this is going to be done in 2 parts. We're going to prepare the sauce in this pan, fry the steak in another pan, then add the sauce to that cooking pan to finish. Marco says he first learned how to cook this at the Box Tree restaurant in Yorkshire.
I was taught it when I was a boy of 18 years old at the Box Tree in Ilkley, West Yorkshire. Michael Lawson was the first British chef to ever win 2 stars in Michelin.
The Box Tree was a formative part of Marco's life, learning lots of key ingredients, techniques and skills that he would employ throughout the rest of his career. And I'm just looking for the onions here to soften, just to break down where you poke them with your spatula and they give. At the moment, my onions have got a nice glisten and shine to them, but they're still quite firm. I just want to soften them down. Because a recipe is so historic, it means no one can really agree what the true recipe should be. It's just one of those where people are going to argue about it non-stop, saying theirs is the best and theirs is the only way to do it. But let's just concentrate on having a nice sauce to have with our steak. My onions have sweated down now. They're very soft, very tender. And this is where we're going to add some booze to the pan and deglaze it. Marco prefers cognac, and I think that's more traditional. I don't have any cognac in the house, but I do have some port, and I really like the taste of port in steak sauces. So any heavy, strong flavour is going to do here. So we're going to turn the heat up at that point and really get that alcohol bubbling to deglaze it, get the good stuff off the bottom of the pan, and also we're going to thicken it down so we're left with concentrated flavour of the alcohol. And this is what we're going to do, something Marco really approves of, building layers of flavour and then extracting the most out of each layer of flavour as we go.
It's all about maximising flavour.
And whilst this is the recipe I'm coming up with, of course you can change it, as the man himself would say.
Put a little bit more, you can put a bit more cream. Yeah, it's your choice really.
So for example, I'm choosing not to add mustard, but I am going to add Worcester sauce. He's quite obsessed with Worcester sauce, and I think that's a really good touch with strong meats like beef.
I love Worcester sauce. It's one of my favourites.
Whereas Worcester sauce and mustard together, I think, might overpower it. Quite a bit, about 50 ml, and again we're going to reduce it down. And now that's reduced down, I'm going to turn the heat down a little bit and add double cream. And this is where the indulgence comes in. And some people would add the stock first, but we're going to add that afterwards. Again, Marco has a philosophy about that. Obviously you're going to be doing some reduction, you're going to be reducing it down. So it's going to concentrate the flavour of the stock and possibly over-season it. So now our cream has come down to coating consistency, where it will stick to the back of a spoon. Most of us don't have those luxurious reduced veal stocks around in the kitchen. So I'm going to do something else that I think Marco would approve of, a Knorr beef stock pot.
And this is where my next favourite ingredient comes in. Stock cube.
I'm going to make this quite concentrated. It suggests making it a 300 millilitres of water to one stock pot. I'm going to do 200, so it's a bit more reduced and concentrated flavour. I'll add about half, let it all get combined, and then taste and see what it needs. Although that's the last ingredient we're technically adding to our sauce, it's still got a bit more to go. And this is quite difficult to tell you how much to add because it'll come down to the strength of your stock and the relative strength of all the other ingredients in your pan and what mood they're in, how viscous your cream was reduced. But again, as Marco says, you've got to keep tasting. And in this video I watched, he tastes it quite a lot. Quite a lot of bubbling going on because of course we had the coating consistency, then we diluted it. Going to wait for that coating consistency to come back and then probably stop the cooking at that point. So I think it's cooked as much as I want to now. It is a thick, unctuous sauce but still light enough to move around. Just about a teaspoon of just cracked white peppercorns, and that's going to give that last minute fire. I'm just going to cover that until we need it. We'll come back to this at the very final stage. And now to the meat. Marco would use a fillet steak, but of course he would, he's a chef. I'm going to use something much more down the cheaper end of the scale, but I think it's going to deliver loads of flavour, and that's a rump steak. Rump steak is one of the poor cousins of the steak world, but we're going to treat it like a king. And I'm going to use a technique Marco says he learnt at the Box Tree restaurant, which is to combine corn flour and pepper and then push that onto the surface of the meat to make a crust.
Little Box Tree secrets. Very few people know this secret, but this is how you keep the crust.
Marco is a huge fan of white pepper, but black pepper makes sense here because it's got that fire and that potency, that zing when it hits your tongue. So we're just going to work that together with my fingers. And much like when you dust a piece of meat with flour before putting it in a casserole, it's just going to form a beautiful crust on the meat. So I'm just pressing that into my corn flour and pepper mixture. little clarified butter into a medium hot pan. If you put it in a very hot pan, it's going to burn that pepper straight away. I've just turned it over now. I'm going to cook it now until it's early 50s degrees centigrade, 52, 53, 54, something like that. Then we're going to add our sauce back into it, which remember is still here infusing. Those peppercorns just seeping into it, and the flavours are developing. It is getting a bit smoky in here. I have ovens and windows. We're at 51 degrees now, so I'm just going to nudge it over to one side of the pan, turn the heat down a little bit, and then strain our sauce into that pan. Marco uses a conical sieve to push it straight into his pan, straight into the steak pan. I don't own a conical sieve, but if you want to help with the running costs of the channel, you can do that in a number of ways. You can join the channel down below, hit join, small subscription fee every month. You get a few extra videos as and when I can. You get emojis that appear next to your name in chat. Or if you want to do a one-off, just press the thanks button underneath and leave me a small tip that I can put towards a conical sieve. If money's an issue for you, don't worry about it at all. Please, just press like and hit the subscribe button. That helps the channel grow and indicates to YouTube this is good stuff, more of this please. Also tells me that you like it, and I will make more of it. By adding that sauce back into the pan, of course we're picking up all the flavour that's in the base of that pan that the meat has left behind, the fond as they call it, but also reheating the sauce and everything seasoning everything else. So I'm going to take the heat off now, and Marco would actually recommend you take this straight to the table like this and serve if you've got multiple steaks. It feels very generous that way. Put it on the middle of the table, pop a steak on everyone's plate, off you go. A very generous way of serving. So that's got a little bit of fire. I'm just going to add a touch of salt because there's been lots of reduction going on along the way. Touch of salt for the steak as well. And then we'll plate up. You've got to serve that with some beautiful crispy chips on the side. You've got to love a steak dinner, right? I certainly do, and I've been cooking this for long enough, so I want to get into it. So you've got there, beautiful piece of steak, glistening. Just heading into medium, which I think is good for rump. It's pure luxury, it's pure, I want to treat someone. Lovely piece of steak. A sauce that's creamy and sweet and a bit sharp, and yet it's got that hum of pepper running through it. It's an absolute delight. And if you've got too much sauce, well, put a chip in it. Oh, delicious. It's got that fire, it's got that zing, it's got that savouriness, it's got that sweetness. So that was my take, my best of Marco Pierre White's steak au poivre. I hope you enjoyed that. Many thanks to all the members down below, and I'll catch you next time.
As I've always said, perfection is lots of little things done well.